The rain was relentless that Tuesday morning in Chicago. The kind that soaks through your coat before you even reach the lobby doors. I walked into Victor Kane's corner office at Nexus Forge Tech at 7:59 a.m., shoes squeaking slightly on the marble floor. Eyes gritty from the overnight flight back from Atlanta, where I'd closed yet another major compliance deal for our supply chain software platform. The lights were already blazing. His coffee mug steamed on the desk, and his monitor was angled deliberately away from the guest chair, as if my presence was an afterthought. "Amelia," Victor said without looking up, sliding a plain manila envelope across the desk like it was yesterday's expense report. "Your position doesn't align with where we're heading anymore. Security will be here shortly to walk you out." His voice was flat, rehearsed, the tone of someone who'd practiced this in the mirror. He tapped a pen rhythmically against the edge of his keyboard. No smile. No explanation beyond that single sentence. Just the envelope and the implication that I was disposable, like the contractors we'd let go last quarter during his so-called efficiency drive. I picked up the envelope slowly, feeling the thick paper between my fingers. Inside were the termination forms, already prepared. My name, employee ID, the phrase organizational restructuring, typed in crisp black ink. The date predated to make it seamless. HR had clearly been looped in early. Everything timed for his 8 a.m. slot. Fire the problem. Move on to smoothie and investor call by 8:45. I scanned the pages without rushing. My pulse stayed steady. But inside, something ancient and familiar stirred, the same feeling I'd had 9 years ago when this company was just 4 people in a cramped loft above a coffee shop on the near west side. Back then, the conference room was a folding table next to a wheezing printer. We didn't have matching chairs or a real budget. Just big dreams and my quiet insistence on getting the legal foundation right from day one. Victor had been brought in 6 months earlier as the transformative CEO, fresh from a string of high-profile exits, Harvard credentials gleaming, promising to scale Nexus Forge into the next big name in logistics compliance tech. Vertical synergies, he liked to say in meetings, unlocking latent value, translation, slash headcount, chase flashy metrics, and position himself for the next private equity flip. He never dug into the operating agreement I drafted myself back when we were still bootstrapping. He skimmed the cap table, saw the names of the visible founders and early investors, and assumed control was his to claim. But I hadn't shouted my ownership. I'd buried it deep in the structures I'd created. Willow Creek Ventures, a holding entity that sounded like some sleepy real estate trust, layered through blind trusts, tied to specific voting classes. Silent shares with directional oversight clauses that activated on executive restructuring. 85% voting control, accumulated quietly over years, covering payroll gaps, backstopping vendor contracts when investors wavered, filing amendments no one scrutinized because they trusted the detail person to handle it. I signed the termination papers with a steady hand, slid them back across the desk. "You sure about this, Victor?" I asked quietly. Not confrontational. Just a question, giving him one last chance to pause. His eyes finally met mine. "Already done." I nodded once. "Then let's make sure it's handled correctly." I stood, coat still damp, expression unreadable. Security never needed to escort me. I walked out on my own terms, through the glass doors into the rain, leaving him thinking he'd just cleared dead weight. That was the moment the real story began, not the firing, but the quiet machinery I'd installed years earlier finally engaging. Because while Victor rehearsed his script, I'd spent the previous night reviewing the same bylaws I'd written by hand when we had no money for lawyers. The provisions were still there, precise and binding, notification requirements before major leadership changes, proxy review gates, material decision constraints, triggers that didn't need drama, just activation. At home, I hung my coat, fed my rescue dog Luna, and opened my laptop. 2 tabs, the governance vault and the notary's emergency portal. Provision 7B required board review before executive terminations. Provision 9F froze directional shifts without majority beneficial owner sign-off. I printed, notarized digitally, uploaded to the encrypted vault, and toggled the lockdown sequence. Notifications fired automatically to the board, legal counsel, and the outside firm we'd used for years. By afternoon, the first ripples hit. Hiring approvals bounced. Restructuring memos were tagged, on hold pending control verification. No one knew why yet. But the stillness spread like a slow wave through the building that had been running on Victor's adrenaline-fueled vision. The next morning, the company felt different, quieter, heavier. Victor stormed into the boardroom mid-conference call. Phone glued to his ear. Suit pressed sharper than usual as if presentation could mask the growing paralysis. "This is obstruction," he snapped, dropping into a chair. "We can't freeze everything. Momentum dies. Investors will panic." The room stayed silent. The chairman, an older investor who'd backed us early, cleared his throat. "We've received documentation requiring verification of beneficial control before any actions proceed." His voice was measured, almost apologetic, but firm. 20 minutes earlier, each board member had opened a locked PDF from Willow Creek Ventures, 85.4% Class A voting shares. Certified, notarized, tied to Section 3.4 of the operating agreement. My initials appeared not as an employee, but as the beneficial owner. Victor gestured wildly at his slide deck. "I have commitments, Phase 2 rollout, investor updates." This creates doubt, but the chairman simply stated the facts. Compliance first. No org changes, no press releases, no terminations valid until reviewed. Victor looked around the table, waiting for allies. The investor rep stared at his tablet. The general counsel calculated severance language silently. No one backed him. The brakes weren't slowing, they were locked. Later that evening, my phone rang, block number. I let it ring once, twice, then answered on the third. A pause. Heavy breathing. "I wasn't aware," Victor managed. "You weren't supposed to be," I replied evenly. Another long pause. I could picture the calculations collapsing in his head, the dotted lines between his authority and the actual ownership dissolving. "We'll need a special session," he said, trying to reclaim tone. "Monday, 9 a.m. Monday works," I said. "I'll circulate the proxy materials tonight." I ended the call without flourish. No threats. Just inevitability. The folder on my desktop, governance activation, had waited 6 years. Inside, ownership certificates, trust docs, annotated operating agreement, updated cap table, notarized proxy packet. I reviewed every line, attached everything into one locked PDF, and sent it with a single-line cover, confirming compliance to avoid additional exposure. By Sunday night, the board had the full picture. Monday morning, Victor arrived 10 minutes early, dark suit, fresh shave, new cufflinks still in plastic. He entered the boardroom like he was giving a keynote, not facing removal. The chairman opened without drama. Updated documentation shows Willow Creek Ventures holds controlling interest. He read the figures aloud. 85.4%. Proxies certified. In light of MS. Grant's position. Will proceed to a vote of confidence. Victor blinked rapidly. His mouth opened, closed. No one spoke for him. The HR director, who'd championed him early, wouldn't meet his eyes. 9 votes in favor of removal. 1 abstention. The gavel fell with a single clean knock. Motion carried. Mr. Kane is removed as CEO. Effective immediately. No yelling. No rescue. Just air leaving the room and Victor's breath catching. He sat frozen, spine wilting, staring at the table. The procedural cadence of consequence had erased him in under 3 minutes. The boardroom emptied quickly afterward, people eager to distance themselves from the fallout. Victor lingered, gathering papers into his briefcase with shaking hands, then left slower than he'd entered, the room having turned on him without a word. I hadn't taken Victor's chair. I didn't need to. Instead, I recommended Lena Torres, former COO of a partner logistics firm we'd worked with for years. Quiet, meticulous, zero ego. She'd once killed a major deal over a single missing compliance clause, saying foundations mattered more than headlines. One meeting was enough. I slid the documents over and asked if she could give us 6 months of clean operations with full discretion. She agreed. Within days, the panic thinned. Hiring freeze lifted selectively. Restructuring memos were revisited calmly. Lena met one-on-one with every team lead. What do you actually need to do your job better? People were startled at first. No jargon, no pressure tactics, just direct questions. Slack channels settled from frantic all-caps threads to structured updates. Vendors who'd gone silent under Victor's whiplash re-engaged. A key European partner reinitiated talks, citing restored confidence in continuity. Revenue projections stabilized. International deals we'd nearly lost firmed up with better terms. Inside the building, the whispers changed. No longer fearful gossip about firings, but warmer observations. Feels like we're building again. One designer was overheard saying, "She's here to keep us from tipping over." They didn't know I'd heard, but the distinction mattered. True ownership wasn't about the spotlight, it was ensuring the stage didn't collapse under ego. 3 months later, Lena's role became permanent with unanimous support. Operations hummed, without spectacle. My involvement stayed at quarterly reviews, deliberate distance. The structure I'd built was designed for resilience, not dependence on any one person. On a rainy Thursday, Chicago's specialty, a message arrived from a board contact I hadn't heard from since the vote, a link to Victor's new LinkedIn post. Excited to advise founders on strategic exits and leadership transformation, it read. Helping next-gen leaders avoid scaling pitfalls. The photo was polished, tight suit, bookcase, backdrop, chin up in confident pose. I stared at it, not with anger, but quiet study, like examining an old injury that no longer hurt. Then I noticed the comment halfway down, already buried by the algorithm. From one of our board members who'd received the Willow Creek file first. Start by reading your own bylaws next time. No drama. Just a precise scalpel. I closed the tab. Victor would spin his narrative for whatever audience still listened. But the context had shifted for everyone else, investors, clients, analysts. They remembered the sudden freeze, the silence, the course correction. The comment whispered the truth. He thought he was firing a mid-level operator. Instead, he tried to eliminate the person who legally directed the ship. The company continued forward without Victor's drama. Revenue climbed steadily. Partners recommitted on firmer footing. Mara no. Lena brought the ballast we'd needed. I stepped further back. My quarterly oversight a pulse check rather than daily presence. The point of all those buried clauses had always been sustainability through clarity and discipline, not personal glory. Sitting in the same conference room months later, listening to updates, I felt the weight of what had been restored. No vindication speeches. No gloating. Just systems working again. Decisions free from vanity. The rain outside had eased to a drizzle, leaving the sidewalks gleaming, a small Chicago mercy. In the end, the story leaves a lingering question. How often do we underestimate the quiet architects who build the foundations we stand on? Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through paper, patience, and precise preparation. Victor learned that too late. The rest of us were reminded why silence, when backed by structure, can speak loudest of all. What would you have done in my place? Fight loudly, or ensure the fight was already won before it began?